Testing, testing. Is it working?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Stick it in your pocket or on your belt.
In the back?
Yeah, anything you want.
All right.
You're on it, it's recording.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And we'll manage that to show. I'll go. Hey, good morning. I'll go find her. Hey, we'll see you later.
Do you want the slides on the screen at the same time we're doing it?
She's going to run the slides from the iPad.
Can
Oh,
you
no, yeah.
change the stream deck? Do you want the slides on?
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, we're going to get started here in just a minute if we want to have a seat. Just going to hand these out. You guys can, yes, you each have one. Here you go. Yes. It's two for you guys. Got you one. Yeah, I know. This is the, oh, I got one more. Take one and pass it down. Can one of you share for now? Actually, all right. Hey, everyone. So, welcome to our child abuse awareness training. Austin's going to shut the door for me. He's got it. Yeah. We are doing this training for all folks who will be assisting with any kind of youth ministry. So that's working with our youth group, working in the nursery, helping to do the children's Sunday school. And so this is a requirement for any people that are doing that. And we are recording it today, so I'll be also talking with the audience that is listening as we do this later on in the year for new people that come along. So if you are watching this on the recording, welcome, and hopefully you're here with a group of people and you're doing that with them. A few things I want to say before we start is we are going to be talking about a topic that can sometimes be difficult. And one of the things that I'm going to do today is educate you on child sexual abuse and child abuse and the dynamics, how it happens, some of offender behavior to be on the lookout for, as well as how we can make sure that we are keeping our kids safe in this church and in our community. With that said, sometimes that can be triggering for some people. Sometimes it can make people have questions or feel uncomfortable. And I just want to say that's okay. It's an uncomfortable topic at times. And if you have anything that you feel like you want to talk to me about or somebody else, please do so after. I am very happy to be here and chat with anybody who just has some concerns or questions or thoughts. And then if you are watching this on the video, please also feel free to connect with me at some point if you have specific personal questions or thoughts that you want to share and address. So, with that said, what we're going to do is we're going to go through some slides, and I'm going to go through this presentation. We don't want to take up a ton of your time, although I will say this is very important, so it's a good use of your time. But we're going to go through some slides, and then afterwards, you'll see in your hand, we're going to go through a specific part of this document. You have the Safe Ministry Mandates, which is on the third page of this. We're going to go through that together so that I make sure you truly understand what our rules are when it comes to our safe ministry mandates with children. And then we will be asking you to take a look at this, and if you feel like you're ready to sign it because you agree to those rules, then you can sign it and bring it to me and I'll witness it and we'll have you on our list and start the process also for the criminal record check and all that, which Kira will help with. So, first, I just want to start off with talking about what is an abused child? So let's just talk about some definitions. An abused child is somebody who's been intentionally physically injured or psychologically injured, or they've been sexually abused, or they've been sexually exploited. And the statistics specifically around sexual abuse is something I really want to spend some time on today, and that is that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused before they turn 18. So of every 4 girls in a group, there's 1 that will be sexually abused. Of every 6 boys, there's 1 that will be sexually abused. 1 in 5 children are solicited sexually on the internet. What does that mean? That means that of every 5 kids, 1 of them is solicited, meaning somebody is trying to talk to them sexually, trying to get them to meet with them, trying to have a sexual interaction with the child. Also, nearly 70% of all sexual assaults that happen in this world, in this country, occur to children under the ages of 17. 70%. So that is by far the majority of sexual assaults happen to children under the age of 17. So this is a very serious situation. And then 50% of victims of forcible sodomy, sexual assault with an object, and forcible fondling happen to kids under the age of 12. Again, this is a very real and it happens all the time and right under our noses. So the question is, how pervasive is it? It's weird. So 1 in 5 Americans say that they've been a victim of sexual abuse. And 59% of Americans know somebody who has been affected by child abuse. I can pretty much guarantee you that probably everybody in this room knows somebody that's been sexually abused. So I think that number is actually quite low. Because I think people, everybody that I talk to, whenever I do one of these talks, whenever I go and I meet with people about the work that we do, either at Lighthouse or before when working with at child advocacy centers, it seems like almost every time somebody is either saying, oh, it has happened to me, or they're saying, yes, it has happened in my family, or somebody that I know it has happened to. But so many people say that it doesn't happen in my house. But I trust everybody in my house. And one of the things that I'm going to say to you today is that we should never use trust as our guide, ever. We want to use facts. And the facts are that child sexual abuse has a very high probability, and 94% of children are sexually abused by somebody they know and love. So it is not necessarily the creepy man at the mall, although I do tell my children to watch out for creepy men at the mall. It is not necessarily the creepy men at the mall. It is not necessarily, some stranger that's walking down the street. It's people sitting around your Thanksgiving dinner table. And I, again, don't mean to say that to scare people or to ruin people's Thanksgivings, but what I'm saying is we just need to use facts when we are looking at this, and not just like, oh, they're my family, I trust them. Oh, they're in my church, so I trust them. Oh, I've known them forever, so I totally trust them. You just can't use that. You want to use actual data. And we'll talk about how that means. It's weird. I don't know whether it's because it's on your iPad, but anyway. So we're going to talk about recognizing, what in the world? Okay. Sorry. They're just not the same as the ones that are on but it's okay. So, sexual abuse is any sexual contact with a child, and that includes rape, oral penetration, genital penetration, anal penetration, digital penetration, sexual exploitation, and molestation. So it's any of those things. So when we're talking about sexual abuse, it can be any of those things. And it is a sexual act between an adult and a child that is younger than 16. Why the magic number is 16 is that in the law in New Hampshire, that is a 16-year-old is able allegedly to have consent for sexual relations. Or it's a sexual abuse is also between two children, both under the age of 16, oftentimes when one is exuding force over the other one. So it's either an older child or a bigger child or just a more aggressive child. Then there's also forcing, coercing, or persuading a child under the age of 16 in any type of sexual act. And that could mean sexting, exhibitionism, showing parts on the internet, talking sexually. Any of those things are considered sexual abuse. Manufacturing or possessing or distributing pornographic images of a child under the age of 18 is sexual abuse. What does that mean? That means if you have a naked picture of a person under the age of 18, of a child, and you email that, or you text that, or you send that out, that is child pornography, that is sexual abuse, and that is actually, a lot of kids don't know this, but that is a criminal thing and can be punished by the FBI. That is a federal crime. That is not even a local jurisdiction thing. So it is very, very serious. And I know that these days there's so much of that happening and kids don't realize it, or they're on Snapchat and they think it's funny, but it's actually very much against the law and very dangerous. Oftentimes, predators that are online will go online and they'll pretend that they are a child or a teenager, and they will convince that child or other teenager to send me a quick picture, just one picture, I won't show anyone. Well, that one picture then becomes blackmail, because then that person is saying, well, if you don't send me another one doing something else or something showing more, I'm going to send this to all of your friends. I'm going to tell your parents. I'm going to put this on Facebook. I'm going to do, and they start using it as, so it is never, ever a good idea, even if you're like, oh, they're my, online boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever. It is just always very dangerous. And we even had a man just a couple years ago in Goffstown, and there are sexual predators everywhere, but in Goffstown, he was a baseball coach, and if anybody is from Goffstown, baseball is a huge thing in Goffstown. He was a baseball coach. He was going online pretending to be a 13 or 14-year-old girl to all of the boys on the baseball team. And the boys didn't know that they were all separately dating this online girl that this coach was introducing them to. And pictures were going back and forth, and all kinds of awful things were happening. And he is in prison for a very long time. If you saw him, he is a young, 20-something, good-looking guy that is like a coach in Goffstown, New Hampshire, in our baseball teams. So you just never know. So when we are here at our church and we are going to be around children, we need to know what are some of the indicators that maybe a child has been sexually abused. We could have a 4 or 5-year-old in here, or a 9-year-old. And some of these are some physical indicators. An obvious one is difficult walking or sitting, torn or stained underclothing, bruises or bleeding around their genitalia, frequent complaints of stomach aches or headaches, sexually transmitted diseases, urinary tract or yeast infections that are happening all the time, and then obviously pregnancy if a teen is pregnant all of a sudden, or a preteen. And so these are physical indicators. I will say it is rare to see physical indicators of sexual abuse. It is it's children's bodies heal fast. And it is not something like you would be like, well, I know, because I don't see anything. Even if you're caring for a little child, well, I didn't see anything. Even doctors sometimes, when we have brought children to doctors, and even if they've been penetrated, they can oftentimes not show any signs physically, even by a pediatrician. So you can't count on these physical indicators, but you can know that they are a red flag that you should think about. Behavioral indicators of a child who may be being sexually abused is running away from home. Sadly, oftentimes these kids run away from home and end up being very much victims of trafficking, and that's sex trafficking or prostitution, if people don't know what that means. And that is very highly connected. Promiscuity, so a child or a teenager that is very promiscuous can often be a sign that they have been sexually abused. If the child is parentified, they're very much acting like adult. Fire setting. So children that set fires, for some reason, that is very highly linked to children who have been sexually abused. Aggressiveness, withdrawal, or, by the way, none of the above. It can be the perfect child that just looks perfect and happy and will do everything to please you and is showing no signs of anything. They could also be sexually abused. So you just never really know. Other things that you'll see, especially is inappropriate play or premature understanding of sex. So if a child is in our daycare or in our nursery and they know about things like oral sex, there's no reason that a child should know anything about oral sex unless they were showed it or it was done to them or something like that, or any other kind of sexual interaction, or if they're acting out sexually on other children. Or maybe children are feeling threatened by physical contact or closeness. They jump when you go and just to pet them on the arm, or they're just very uncomfortable as you're walking toward them, kind of backing up. Changes in sleep patterns. So if you hear the mom or dad talking about how they don't ever sleep or they're up all night, bedwetting is another very very popular response to child sexual abuse is bedwetting. And that does not mean that if a child's wetting the bed, that must mean they're being sexually abused. But it is a sign that because of that stress, that they are wetting the bed. Now, physical abuse. So, we're not only here, as we're working with children, I know sexual abuse is, do you have a question? No, okay. I know sexual abuse is something that we talk about a lot because that's something that is hidden, something that is hard to understand and grasp. But we also need to make sure that we are keeping our kids safe and that we're understanding what the physical abuse indicators are. So obviously, seeing any bruising or welts or burns that can't be explained sufficiently. And so people know, right, cigarette burns, and I'm telling you, this happens. This still happens. And where if it's a little round burn, it's a cigarette burn. Or if it's a burn and it looks like an iron, or it looks like something that you like an appliance of some kind. Bruises on the face, lips, and mouth of infants, those are highly susceptible, or they make you think that there could be some kind of abuse going on. And then bruises on several surface planes at the same time. What that means is, it's really normal for kids to have lots of bruising on their knees or to fall down or to their elbows. But if you have a child that has bruising on their back and it's on their arm, and it's on their lower leg, and it just isn't, that's concerning. That's, and if you're saying, how did that happen? And they just said, I just, ran into the couch, or and it's really hard as a child to run into something to get hurt that badly. So you have to think, does that match the explanation? Don't just assume when you ask a child, how did they get that mark on their eye, and they just give you an answer. Don't just be like, oh, okay. Think about, is that plausible? Is that something that could actually be possible? We used to talk about the killer couch, because we would get child abuse cases when I was an investigator where, parents would say, oh, she fell off the couch. And that's this deep. And you can't have 2 broken bones from falling off a couch that's this high. It's just not plausible. And so you just want to be thinking about that. Another, for physical abuse, reported injuries. So other indicators are reported injuries are caused by the parent. So obviously, if the child says, my dad did this, my mom did this. Extremes in behavior. So children that are very, extremely aggressive 1 minute, extremely quiet another minute, kind of back and forth. Again, discomfort with physical contact. Unprovoked cruelty to animals. So if you hear a child talking about hurting their pets at home, this is very much a sign of their being physically abused. Kids will sometimes act out on their pets, and that's also for sexual abuse too, believe it or not. It's just an aggression. It's something to have control over. it's also something to just repeat of what is happening to them. Wearing of clothes not appropriate for the weather, believe it or not, is a sign that there is some kind of abuse going on, where there's just not, they're coming in wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and not like a teenager wearing shorts and a t-shirt because they're weird, and that's what teenagers do in the winter. But I'm just kidding, you guys aren't weird. But it's, really a young child, like, not wearing just appropriate, or they're still wearing a winter coat and it's, 80 degrees outside, and so. The other thing is domestic violence and child abuse are very much connected. And so they often occur very much at the same time. And a child who is witnessing domestic violence, that also needs to be reported. That is incredibly traumatizing. It just mom being or dad being beat, or grandparents being beat, and they talk about that needs to be reported to DCYF, even though it is not, nobody's hurting the child. We will say, well, Johnny, no, he's not hurting Johnny though, so that's okay. And it's not. And it needs to be reported. The questions that you want to ask yourself, these are all out of order, but that's okay. So back to the physical abuse are these bruises that you're seeing, are they happening all the time? Or is it, if it's just like a one-time deal, but are they coming in week after week where they are just like another, bruise on the head, another like weird bruise on the arm, and they're just, and they're all at different stages of healing. That is definitely something that you want to question. So there's some myths about child abuse, and one of them is that only certain kids, families, it's only African families, it's only, the list goes on, and it's just not true. It happens in all types of families. It happens in all ethnicities. It is, child sexual abuse is the one thing that happens across the entire globe. So every single nation, it has child sexual abuse in it. Another common myth is that children frequently lie about abuse. Children do not lie about abuse. Children lie to get out of trouble. They don't lie to get parents and adults into trouble. So many times when I used to work in the Child Advocacy Center field, and whenever I did talks, people would always say, well, how often is the person, somebody accused of abuse, and it didn't really happen. And the truth is, it's rare. It is very rare that we would find out that a child just completely lied. And if they did lie, generally it's because one of the other parents is trying to convince them to lie and is telling them because it's a custody battle or something like that. So it's easy to spot the type of person who would abuse a child. It is not easy to spot a person who abused a child. Like I said, with the Goffstown coach, no child is immune. These people look like everyday, ordinary people. We also had other cases where it was the mailman, where there was a UNH professor that was a child molester. I mean, the list goes on. So now, children, as I told you, every gender, every race, every ethnicity, even though I said earlier that 1 in 6 boys, as opposed to 1 in 4 boys, will be sexually abused, chances are boys are actually abused at a similar rate as girls, but they are less likely to disclose. So back to the false reports. Only 4 to 8% of child sexual abuse reports are fabricated, meaning they're made up. But sadly, only 10% of abused children come forward before they're 18. That means 1 out of every 10 child who's been sexually abused comes forward. And so to put that in perspective, at the Child Advocacy Center, we would see about 1,000 kids between our 3 centers in a year. And we would see about 1,000 kids. So if you think about that, multiply that times 9. There's 9,000 other children out there that never got served, that never got to come and have an investigation and are out there suffering. And that is where so many times adults will come up and say, I was sexually abused and I never told anybody until just now. And oftentimes that happens when we're talking about child sexual abuse in a child setting, because it just, people don't talk about it. So we want to be a church and a place where people feel like it's okay to talk about. One, we should be supporting and ministering to one another who have histories of abuse in their past and trauma. But two, we want parents to know when they come here, this is not some secret thing that we are going to not talk about. And we are going to be, our eyes are going to be wide open, and we are going to talk about this situation. Now, offenders, again, they are people that we know and trust. They are family members, they are teachers, they're clergy, they're coaches, they're neighbors. They are rarely strangers. So, some statistics about sex offenders. Now, I have to say, this is tricky because we could do a whole class on sex offender behavior, and it's a whole psychological thing, and so I'm going to give you some data, but that doesn't mean we should not be profiling people, to use a Law and Order word or a Blue Bloods word. If you're in our family, we watch Blue Bloods. Anyway, but 70% of sex offenders have between 1 and 9 victims. So it's a smaller percent that have more than 10. A serial child molester, meaning this is somebody that is just, this is all that they are attracted to is children. They can have over 400 victims in a lifetime. 75% of serial rapists report that they were sexually abused as youngsters. So that does not mean that somebody who is sexually abused is automatically going to be a sexual abuser. It does show that those who do abuse children have a history of being sexually abused themselves. And I've seen that. I will say child sexual abusers are also very crafty, liars, and so even in prison, sometimes they may say, yes, I was sexually abused as a child, when they really weren't. They're just trying to get people to feel sorry for them. So you have to, there's a balance there of trying to figure out, is that data really right? Because were they really sexually abused as a child? Now, chances are they have had trauma in their life for sure. But anyway. Most child sex offenders are heterosexual males. So a lot of times people think that, they must be gay, especially if they're abusing boys. Not the case at all. Most of them are heterosexual males. And they typically begin abusing children by the age of 15. 3/4 of violent victimization of children takes place in the home or the offender's home. And so again, this is something that is not happening in creepy places like the mall. And nobody's ever going to go to the mall again, it happens in the home. So remember, these are people that we know. Some other myths about sex offenders: child sex offenders only have sex with children. That is not true. Many of them are married. Many of them, are having regular sex with grown-ups. Child sex offenders are only men. Sadly, that's not true either. They're sexual offenders that are women. And when I, again, was doing these investigations, we would have cases where girls were sexually abused or boys were sexually abused by women. That can come up with, people are like, how is that possible? Oftentimes with women, it's through, with their own children, through things that look like they're just taking care of them. It's masked in a way that looks like they're just taking care of their personal needs. Or we have the more prepubescent or just pubescent boys, and then the older teacher or coach, or that looks like, it's like, oh, isn't that cute? He has a crush on her, and it's actually that woman is completely a pedophile. And also a myth is that child sex offenders randomly, they do not randomly victims. They specifically pick out victims that they know will not tell anybody. They are not going to target a child who seems to be very outgoing, who seems to be somebody who's connected with adults, who seems to be self-confident. They're going to go for the ones that are quiet, that are easy to manipulate, that are easy to gain their trust, that are maybe a little bit of a loner. Single moms, their kids are at high risk because oftentimes the offender can come in and really help that mom out by saying, hey, I can help drive your child, I can help take care of this, let me help you, pay for your rent or whatever, building up ways that they can get into their life so that they have access to the kids. So again, most sex offenders are normal intelligence. Some of them you'll see they may not have friends their own age. So a lot of times, people say, like, where would you find a sex offender? Well, you would find them where kids are. So that's where they're going to come. They're going to come, and frankly, they're going to come to churches where there are kids. They are going to come to be a baseball coach, or they're going to go and want to work in a school. I mean, sadly, that's if they're attracted to children and they want to be with children, that's where they're going to go. And so that's why we have to keep our eyes open. The way sex offenders oftentimes get to children is through this grooming process. So again, giving them gifts, legitimizing contact with them. So being, again, helping with rides, things like that makes it look like it's totally normal that they're hanging out together. Taking them to parks or museums, finding out what's their favorite. Oh, they really like McDonald's strawberry milkshakes. So they're going to start bringing strawberry milkshakes because then that person really is getting, that child is, and their parents is getting to trust them. The perpetrator is not only grooming the child, they're grooming the adults around the child as well. And that is really how they manipulate them into thinking, this is a safe person that now my child can go with. But that's because they're grooming you. The primary goal of a sex offender is to gain the child's trust and gain the parent's trust. Now, again, when we're doing this work and we have more kids in our church and we spend more time with them, there's a chance that a child may disclose that they have been sexually abused. Kids sometimes have spontaneous disclosures because oftentimes, especially little kids, they don't even realize that they're being sexually abused. They'll just be like, oh, so-and-so touches my pee-pee. And you just are like, what? And so we have to make sure that we react in a way that is not emotional. When children see, and as adults, we have to be very careful of this because we're like horrified, right? And we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. But a child is reading every single little movement of your face. And if you look horrified, or you look scared, or you look really angry, they're going to, wha-bam, shut right down because you're an adult and they don't want you to be mad at them. And a child's brain thinks, oh, they're mad at me. This is my fault. And so you want to not react emotionally. And that can mean a very straight face. That can mean I'm so happy that you told me that. And if you need to get a little more information, I'm so happy you told me that. Can you tell me a little more? Because maybe you need to understand a little more of what they're saying. Or can you tell me who that was? But again, staying as very normal-faced as possible. When you walk away, you can cry, you can punch the wall, you can do whatever you need to do, but to just really show not a whole lot of emotion. Offering support is very good. Offering support, saying, I want to help you with this, especially if it's a child, maybe a teen, who's coming to you and saying, this is happening to me. I'm really scared. I don't know what to do. If they're purposefully coming to you and disclosing, saying, I'm here to help you. Again, I'm glad you told me. I'm glad you told me is a very important thing to say to anybody that's coming to you that is telling you something that has happened in their life. But then you need to report it immediately. We are not going to be a church where we do our own investigations in this church. And we are not going to be the church that, Pastor Bob gets involved and we have deacons involved and we start interviewing all the people and we start wondering. That's not how we're going to do it. That is actually against the law. And And I say that sternly because being in this field, I've seen so many cases where the church has done their own investigation, and then it never ends well. It's not ever good, and oftentimes the offender ends up getting completely off. And that is whether the offender is in the church or a parent of the child, maybe even not going to the church, but it's still never good. So our rules here are that if a child discloses to you, you get the information that they're telling you, not a full interview, just basic information so that you can report that to DCYF. And we'll have, Kira or myself or Pastor Bob will help with that process of making sure that that is reported. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Like I said, most young victims don't even recognize that they're being abused, and so you may catch them just, off the cuff saying things that you're like, wait, let's go back to that. Others can be very scared or ashamed. Almost 80% initially deny their abuse or are tentative about disclosing. And the reason that this is, again, is that, think about it, it's somebody they know and love. So a child who has to disclose that they're being sexually abused are not just risking like people knowing about them, but they're risking losing their family, losing their income of their family if it's like mom's boyfriend, or making mom mad, or making ruining the family. Like, that's a lot, and kids take that on and would much rather keep quiet than disrupt. So anyway, I can't say that enough. So many times kids will even recant, meaning that they'll say it happened, but then they'll go back and say, I was just kidding. That actually didn't happen. And that is often a way, again, because they're kind of testing the waters, and if things went a little awry, they're like, yep, take it back. And unfortunately, when a child takes it back in the criminal justice system, there's nothing that the criminal justice system can do. So we want to make our church a safe place for children and youth to come. And that means that we need to make choices. We need to recognize that we can be proactive to protect kids. And that might mean that sometimes it's annoying because we, can't drive one kid home because we need another person in the car. And that can be annoying because you can be like, Wendy can be like, but I know Austin, and I know the family, and I should not be allowing Wendy to drive Austin home. It's just not the rule, and we have to just be and follow these rules so that it's never an exception. And to do that, that's how we're protecting kids. Taking risks. So if we do what we've always done, we will get what we've always gotten. So, we want to make sure that we're not doing things the way we've always done them. And I'm not at all saying that anybody here has a history, I don't even know, of being sexually abused here. But we just want to start a fresh start with how we're doing things. And then supporting one another. Make this a team of a community where we are working together, where we can say to one another, hey, Jen, I'm seeing this in our youth group with this, what do you think? And, we want to be able to talk to each other and support one another in making sure that the kids are safe here. This should be a true priority for us. So some specific actions, this is really small too, sorry, is we want to minimize or actually alleviate any one-on-one opportunities. So there's never a time where a child that is not the parent of the child should be alone with an adult, ever. There's just never, that should never happen. And so we need to make sure that that is flagged, and there might be times where it could sort of happen accidentally or start to happen, and somebody in this room needs to be like, oh, hey, hold on. And I know it feels awkward because somebody's like a little offended, like, well, what? And you just have to say, sorry, it's just this rule, and so the other thing is we need to look for blind spots in the church. And that means when you're working in there in the back, and we're going to have the room set up in 3 areas, when we start this, we are going to do a walk around, and we're going to see, like, where are some spots where either two children, because remember, this also can happen to children, or an adult and a child can be unseen. And so we want to make sure that we find those blind spots. We want to recognize and publicly acknowledge red flag behavior and then redirect it. So again, pointing out when, hey, that's not a good idea, or you see somebody going to the restroom with a child, we want to make sure that we're calling that out. Talk openly about it. Again, we want to be the church that talks openly about this so that when people come, A, if they're a sex offender, they know this is probably not the church for me. And B, if parents come with children, they say, hey, I want to come to that church because they're really open about this. And always enforcing the rules. Reporting abuse. So oftentimes people are like, oh, I can't report that. That's like, and they think like the police and sirens are going to show up at the person's house when you report. That is not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is they're just going to look into it. And, you're not responsible for proving whether or not that abuse happened before you make the call. You're just responsible for saying, I see some red flags and I'm concerned. You could be one of 10 other people from around this child's life that have made this report. And your report isn't enough to look into it, but yours with all these others rises it to the level where DCYF or the detective will look into it. And so it's a law in New Hampshire. Everybody over the age of 18 is a mandated reporter. And so if you are aware of any kind of physical, sexual abuse, domestic violence, any harm to a child, you have to report it. And so the central intake number is here, and we'll have that. We should really have that posted around. But Pastor Bob will always have that available for you for if you need to make that. Does anybody have any questions about all of that I just threw to you? Just about child abuse, child sexual abuse, before we go through the mandates? Okay. All right. So if you turn with me, and we're just going to, again, I just want to explain some of these so that we're sure that you all understand. And this is where, please ask me questions if you have questions. So under the heading of Safe Ministry Mandates, it's page 3. And before this, it really goes through all of the different definitions of what is sexual abuse, what is safe policy administrator, all that stuff. So that's just stuff you can read on your own. But one here is everybody needs to follow the rule of 3. So participants, by the way, are teachers, people that are getting involved with the youth or children. And this is where the rule of 3, right? So if you have, for infants, it's one adult with 3 infants. Toddlers, 1 adult with 4 toddlers. So you see that. But the biggest thing here is talking again about how there should never be a 1 child, 1 adult situation, ever. And even if somebody is mentoring or consulting with a child, because we have teenagers, right? And we may have programs, I would hope, as we're growing, where, we would match kids with adults and to do mentoring, and that is totally fine. But what that means is they just need to be in the sight of somebody else. So they don't need to be in on the conversation, but they need to be seen by somebody else around. Number 3, any adult leaders and assistant leaders working with children and youth must be at least 5 years older than the oldest participants. Does that make sense? So if we have kids in the youth group that are 15, we cannot have an 18-year-old that is working with the kids. They need to be 5 years older. Assistant leaders must work under the supervision of 2 adult leaders. So assistant leaders are kids, and they must be under the supervision of 2. Overnight ministry events, number 5. So there are times where we could do overnight ministry events, where some work camp is something that this year was not overnight, but in the future years will be. And so the kids all sleep together and in one space. Obviously, girls with girls, boys with boys. But we have very specific sleeping distance between the adult leaders. They obviously have to have co-ed adult leaders. We have to make sure that all the medical releases and all of that is permitted for overnight. Travel. Only adult leaders will be allowed to drive participants to ministry events, so they must be 21 years of age. So we can't have 16-year-olds driving, kids. We can't, even 18-year-olds. They need to be 21 years or older, have a valid driver's license, proof of insurance with the state's minimums, and not be otherwise disqualified, like under the influence or on medication that impairs their judgment. Written permission from the parent or legal guardian is required for events requiring transportation to and from the event location. So, for example, we took all of the kids to Pilgrim Pines, and so starting in September, if we were to do that again, we would need to get all of the kids signed permission forms from their parents that we could drive them, because Jennifer and Bob and I are the ones that drove the kids, and we would have needed to get all of their parents' permission. This one is important, phone and video and online communication. Again, this is more for people that are going to be working with teens or tweens, I guess, is that adult leaders must notify parents before requesting access or friending, texting, any via social media, using any kind of online video communication that must be approved by the kids' parents. And if we do start any social media groups, like a text group or a social media Facebook page, there needs to be at least 2 adult leaders on that group, holding each other accountable. Adult leaders shall not photograph participants for use on internet without permission. Now, toileting young children. So if we have children that need to use the bathroom, obviously we need to help them if they need that help. So adult leaders, when at all possible, you'll wait outside the bathroom door while the child does what they need to do in the bathroom. But if a child, so they should take care of themselves when possible. If they can't and they need help with clothing, then the adult should have the child step out of the bathroom and into an open area and help them adjust their clothes. So use your judgment. Use the door so that the other people can't see, to give the child privacy, but no going into the bathroom and shutting the door with the child if you're helping them. If an adult leader is helping a child go to the bathroom, so if an extreme case where a child needs to be in the bathroom and you need to go in there, even if the door is just, you keep it open this much, you need to let the other adult leader know what you're doing, so that they're aware that that's what you're doing. Because again, you don't want to be red flagged as, hey, you can't be doing that, going into the bathroom with the child. When helping children clean up from crafts, washing their hands, the bathroom door should always be left open. So adult leaders and assistant leaders will have to submit an application for ministry along with 3 references. I know that might sound like a lot, but again, these are our children. This church, we need to protect them, and so we need to have references, work, volunteer, ministry references. Applicants should be active in the local church for a minimum of 6 months prior to being one of our leaders. And so, we just want to, as people get to know you and whatever, references will be checked by our staff, the staff, Bob and Kira. Adult leaders, so you'll sign the criminal record background check. That's every 2 years. Again, fill out the application. There will be an interview and just talking with the Christian Education Committee. And then we go on. If there's any concern about anybody applying, then we would disprove the application and have a conversation about that. Finally, adult leaders need to be certified to work or volunteer at our church with kids. And so they'll read and acknowledge this. They'll complete a child abuse training every year and do ongoing training for safe church practices. So throughout the year, we may have some ongoing training, something, we may do or have somebody come in and address an issue. And so we'd ask that you would participate in that. So again, when you're reporting abuse, here's a description of what we need to do. We do not investigate any cases of child abuse at this church, even if it's within the family, even if it's a church, a person that, even if it's Bob, even if it's a person that works here, as we get staff, we never ever do those ourselves. We always report them out. All the information is always documented in writing, and we'll have a form for that, and reported to the authorities. So either the police or the Child and Family Services, depending on the allegation. Any adult leader that is accused of abuse will immediately be relieved of duties related to any of the church activities. If the incident concerning the adult leader is unfounded by Child Services and law enforcement, and the deacons have discerned through the situation and don't see any harm, then they will be resuming their role. Parents and guardians are always going to be notified of inappropriate circumstances. So if a child comes in and they're in a group and we find out that one of the assistant leaders, there might be an inappropriate contact or whatever, we would be careful not to share names, but we would let the parents know that was the situation, so that they would be aware that we were on it, though, but they would be aware. The pastor and the church moderator shall notify Bethany Chapel Community Church insurance carrier. That's just what we need to do. Every effort is going to be made to conform and protect the victim of the abuse to ensure that they are having all their needs met. The accused will always be treated with respect and dignity during the outside investigation process, and any statements to the social media. So if we did have a situation that happened in the church, any talking to the media would only be Pastor Bob's job. And so nobody else would be asked to do that or talking to that. So what I would ask is that you take a look again, maybe read through this more, and then sign it. Either I myself or Kira will witness it. We'll take a picture of it and save it in the files so that we know that you can keep this with you. I feel like I just rambled through that whole thing, so please ask any questions you have about this. Yes, Wendy.
Wendy, I'm just going to have you use the mic just because it's recorded.
I have a question about, you said the driving kids or participants to events. Like this Friday, I drove my children and my niece to the event. In the future, would I need to get permission from my brother or sister-in-law in order to drive my niece?
I think she's a family member, so I would say no.
Okay.
Jennifer.
Can you just give me some examples of what kind of, what was it? Not recommendations, is it recommendation? References the kids would obtain it from?
Maybe a teacher at school,
Teacher? Okay.
a coach, a pastor,
Okay.
like from a prior church, or even honestly, family, friends, like somebody that knows the child. Right. Right. Other questions? Okay. Well, again, if this is new to us, this new policy, and so if there are questions, we want to make sure that people really fully understand. So please talk to myself or Kira or Pastor Bob. Also, again, heavy topic. I threw a lot of statistics and content at you that I know can be uncomfortable. So please, reach out to myself or somebody else if you have concerns you want to talk about. And do you have anything else you want to say, Pastor Bob?
A couple of announcements. I'm just putting this on because of the recording.
Okay.
If anyone is teaching or going to be involved in nursery and they're not here, they will not be able to teach or do anything until they've taken the class. So I know there's some people like that are away on vacation, and they'll have to watch. There'll be a video, be able to watch it. There'll be a little bit of a quiz after the video to make sure that you really did watch the video. We do have waiver forms in the front. If you have not had a background check yet, please take one of those. There's an example form and a blank form. And if you'll get those back to me, I'll get those to Merle. He receives all the background checks and will let us know if there's an issue. And then there's a lot of paperwork that Christy talked about, through applications and forms and all that stuff, and we'll get that to you in the next week. And that's, in the slides. So there's a PowerPoint deck that Christy put together that you see up here. That'll be available too. So if you ever want to go back and look at it, it's there.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. And I know it might seem like a lot of, like you have to do the application, but it's really not that big of a deal. And remember, it's important, right? Because this is about keeping our church safe. And and if it's okay with you, I think we'll just close with a prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for this time together. I thank you for our children, Lord, and I thank you for those who want to serve our children in this church. And I pray that you would bless this program. I pray that you would keep our church safe and give us discernment when we need it. I pray that you would strengthen us so that we can work for you. And I also pray for the hearts of those that may be struggling with any of this content, and I pray that you just give them peace. I ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.